Good morning, Unity of Kona.
Good morning.
It is so wonderful to be here this morning. It is my great joy to be a member of this church. I consider it my ohana. And what a blessing every I don't know, fourth Sunday or so that I get to stand up here and see your beautiful faces. If only you could see what you look like. You're a magnificent gift to the world. And today we are going to begin our service by having you stand and saying our affirmation together, which is, I am guided by divine wisdom in every thought, word, and action. And if you'll stay standing, we're going to sing Stand Together, appropriate, by Faith Rivera. So come on up, singers, and join me.
Okay. Today's daily word is about insight. I see my life clearly. The Apostle Paul saw clearly and taught regularly that coming into Christ's consciousness transforms our view of everything, asking, has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? No matter how today's events may unfold, I am never overwhelmed. As I deepen my connection to the Christ mind within, I see beyond worldly appearances to the spiritual truth that underlies everything. My spiritual journey begins with my awareness of the divine power that is God, yea, God. Infinite divine love is so vast, so unimaginable to my human mind, that I am in awe of its power within me. I see my life clearly. What no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor the human heart conceived, what God has prepared for those who love him. And that's Corinthians 2:9. So if you could repeat after me, I see my life clearly. Olive.
Thank you, Sandy. And so now we'll sing our meditation song. If any of the singers want to come up and join me, that'd be great. Every breath, there's a choice to make. Every thought is another opportunity to shine. Be a light for all to see. The choice is mine to manifest a destiny so divine and full of possibilities. Plain to see, it's up to me. I will choose love. I will choose kindness. I will choose peace in every word I say. I will choose love. I will choose honor. See the divine in everything that comes my way. Each and every day, I will choose love. Love is a river that flows through you and me. Love, let it guide your footsteps. Heal your heart and set you I will choose love. I will choose kindness. I will choose peace in every word I say. I will choose love. I will choose honor. See the divine in will choose love. Now we're pleased to have Reb Margie come up and do our meditation, but before she begins, I'd like to bless her with a lay. Thank you, Diana, for bringing this. Thank you for being here, Alona.
Thank you. It is my joy to be here again. So I invite you to just settle into that seat. Allow your body to relax. Send it little kind messages as you take a deep breath in with me. And come to that space at the center of your being where the presence of God, the activity of all that is, the source of infinite light and love, is present at the point of you. Maybe you'd like to touch your heart and connect with that space that is the home of God, the home of infinite spirit. And we float in this quiet space, allowing ourselves to be immersed, surrounded, lifted into the consciousness, the expansive mind of God, to connect with all that is power and strength and wisdom in the universe localized in you. I am the presence of God. Say that in your mind. I am the presence of God. And I am receptive and willing to the life-giving activity of this presence in every cell of my body. I am the presence of God. And as we hold that movement, that spirit, that presence within us, we come back to this time and place, enlivened by this truth. I am the presence of God, filled with quiet confidence in our abilities that come with this knowing, filled with peace. Nothing disturbs the calm peace of my soul. I am the presence of God, and all is well. And so it is. Amen. Thank you, Larry. I always appreciate the grounding that music gives us when we come together to experience community, to experience some expansion, some lightness. So thank you for your gifts shared in this lovely community. Anybody besides me here remember when airline tickets were refundable, changeable, transferable? Yeah, that's been maybe a decade or two ago. Yeah, this is my habit. Thank you, Larry. I can't break it. I guess they were giving us a practice in how to live in the spiritual journey when we had to give up those benefits about airline tickets quite some time back. Because the spiritual journey sets us on a path, moves us in a direction, and there doesn't always feel like there's an off-ramp or that we can find it when we want it. My spiritual journey got triggered, my spiritual, not church journey, the distinct difference, began as a young adult. First I picked up, quite on accident, an alternate name for God. Quite on accident, I picked up a book, Out on a Limb by Shirley MacLaine. Anybody? I see heads nodding. They didn't talk about that stuff in my Presbyterian church when I was growing up. So this was really my first exposure, having come from a conservative small town in central Washington. Wenatchee is my hometown, Spokane people. And I lived in Monterey, so I want to talk with you afterwards in the back, our guests today. In that conservative environment, there was nobody talking about the mystical experience of faith, the woo-woo stuff. And so I am just kind of mesmerized by some of the stories in that book. And at about the same time, my then husband, first husband, and I had relocated from Wyoming to the Bay Area of California. And I was hired by an international corporation to work as a secretary in their regional sales office in a manufacturing facility. I was hired by the gentleman who was the managing supervisor of all of that property, Mr. Marshall Fox. Now, Mr. Fox appeared to match his name. He was a short, lean man, and he had very sharp facial features. And I was completely intimidated in my interview. And I got hired. And then I noticed that his style of management was walking around, and it was talking to, but it felt like accosting people. And so he'd come up to my desk and ask me a question, and I would just mumble. He could walk into the lunchroom where there was laughter and chatter and noise and come through the door and still the room into utter silence, just by his presence. He had us all buffaloed, let me tell you. Now, you may know some of these difficult personalities, that you've crossed trails with in your life, the people that intimidate you, who have a brusque manner, who just don't really seem to have human warmth. You wouldn't find them maybe in this place hugging everybody at the start of Sunday service. Well, Mr. Fox had us all kind of buffaloed. And he reminds me of this. I've got one nerve left, and you're getting on it. It was kind of the attitude he exuded. At that time, I was reading a self-help book. I'm in my 20s, so I'm looking to expand myself in this young adult age. And I was reading a book that I've long lost the title of and the author, but it was a 10-step suggestion of how to change your life, expand your experience. And I was all about that in my mid-20s. And one of the processes in this book was how to relate to, we might call them toxic people these days, difficult personalities to get along with, the ones who are standing on your last nerve. And the process was, find one thing about this individual that's difficult for you to relate to. One thing that's positive, that you can absolutely, sincerely appreciate in this individual. Well, Mr. Fox was my bugaboo individual, and I sat at home one evening thinking, well, what could I possibly appreciate about this man? And I realized his manner arose from the fact that he took his responsibility, a large responsibility, very seriously. And he executed it well. He managed over 100 employees. That facility always ran perfectly. And that was largely due to his management skill. Whether or not you liked his personality, the man knew what he was doing, I came to realize. And I could appreciate that. And so I began to just think of him in terms of the skill he had that made all of our daily lives in this office facility run smoothly, because he was responsible for that. There was never any disaster that didn't get solved. You know how crisis management by the last minute can be really difficult. We didn't have those challenges in this facility. It was really a model for me as a young secretary, when that's what we were called in those days, to see how smoothly something could operate. Because I do have to admit, I don't have as much of that in my personality as Mr. Fox did. So I began to pay attention to appreciate that, and it adjusted my whole relationship with him. Instead of like mumbling when he would come by and ask me a simple question at my desk, it began that he would stop and we'd have conversation. And I got acquainted with this man, and it shifted everything. And at one point, I was sitting where he was walking toward me, and I realized something I hadn't clued into before because of my response to him. He could have been my father's brother in appearance. And I had never noticed that because he flummoxed me so much. So this story is just to share with you that in my middle 20s, not knowing a thing about unity, I wouldn't discover it for more than a decade, I was introduced to our third principle, that our thoughts change our experience. And when we change our thoughts, we change our life. We call it the law of mind action. And this was stunning to me, and I began to experiment it with in all kinds of ways to find out what that power was about and how I could express it more clearly. And so I became frantic almost about watching my thought processes. And I became frustrated with the flow of my life in ways that didn't seem to be making progress. Our co-founder, yes, that's the one I have there. Catch the foxes for us from the Song of Solomon. Those little foxes that menace the vineyards, for our vineyards are so vulnerable when they are in full bloom. Now, the Song of Solomon is actually a libretto, a performance piece, a musical performance piece. And this verse is from a love song, but it speaks to, very poetically, the negative thoughts that can rule our life and shift us into territory we don't choose to be if we are not mindful of them. So catch those little foxes, those little negative thoughts, before they ruin the vineyard, the ideas and the life that you have planted, the seeds you are nurturing to grow into who and what you desire to be. Catch those foxes. Because when we are in a process of growth, we are tender and vulnerable. And we ask ourselves to be mindful of the thoughts we are holding and our perceptions, because they become our actions, which becomes the life we live. So catch the little foxes. Now, maybe as you began your spiritual journey, do you remember the events that started you on the spiritual path? When you began that journey, were you hopeful and delighted? And did you think, oh my gosh, my life is going to change so positively, it's going to be like it's all gift wrapped and tied up with pink ribbons? Anybody have that thought? Are you disabused of this idea by this point in your spiritual journey? We do. We see it with rose-colored glasses. I'm told in the recovery community, they talk about, they see that as being lifted in the pink clouds. You're just in the haze of a pink cloud view of life. When you think it's all going to be rosy because you've crossed this line in your life somehow, and it's all going to shift to the positive. Well, we all learn that the spiritual journey gets us down the road, but we may respond to it a little like this guy. Do you remember Howard Beale from the movie Network? I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. We have those moments right after we've been thinking about pink bows and all tied up in a nice, neat package, and sure, that's what the spiritual journey means. Then something comes along and rattles us completely. In the words of our co-founder of the Unity Movement, Myrtle Fillmore, all of us sooner or later come to the place in our development where we are no longer satisfied to go on living that old life without the knowledge of our oneness with God, the source of our being. We may become restless and dissatisfied. There is a tension in the spiritual journey between that which we can see as the higher self, that place we connected with in meditation today, the true nature of who we are, the true self, and the tension of being human and being locked into the personality that has one foot in the mud while the hand reaches for the heavens. And in that tension is the spiritual process, the spiritual path. And no, the journey is not refundable. We get to stay engaged. Now, this image has been up twice now. How do you respond to it? Just shout it out. Kathy says she wants to close the circle. A friend of mine tells me this is an experiment that often shows up in Psychology 101 classes. The instructor will just put that on the board or on the screen and just wait to see when and if somebody bounces up out of their chair to run close the circle, because they can't stand that openness. That's the space in which we are walking the spiritual journey. It's the space of divine discontent, where we may become unsettled, not knowing why we feel out of sorts with life, but know that we get triggered by some experiences to feel dissatisfaction. Like there's an urge calling us sometimes to make a huge change, and maybe we don't even yet know what it is. This is the space of the spiritual gap where the circle hasn't yet closed. And this is a space in our journey we come to over and over and over. I call it living in the question. And the flow of my life has had enough up and downs, and it has been a spiritual journey since my middle 20s, that I decided I might as well be in the flow of what was rather than pushing upstream. And so I've gotten pretty doggone good at living in the question. Do you know that experience in your life? The space of something seems to be coming to an end, but nothing new has started yet? The gap in the journey. If we wait patiently in that presence we touched in meditation, when we are in that ick, it's a great spiritual term, ick. When we're in that space, if we can just breathe into it, allow ourselves the feeling of the ick, but know that somewhere in this journey comes the gift, the blessing, the thing that closes the circle, that answers the question, that moves us forward. Because that's what we want. We're all in ick now and again, but how do we get out of it? How do we proceed with the journey since we can't find the off-ramp and there is no refund available? How do we keep moving forward? One of the most powerful ways we can practice forward movement in our life has been illustrated by many master teachers. We hold Jesus dear in our movement as the way shower, the master teacher, the one who gave us the example of how we can live in the question and move forward. And it happened to him right out of the gate. If you know the story of the flow of his ministry, he was baptized by John the Baptist. Now, in that time and place, that was a pretty big deal. John the Baptist was revered as a prophet, seen as a master teacher. And Jesus came and was baptized by him and baptized by the Holy Spirit, infused so firmly in that presence of God. Well, and then he was called to a period of reflection, 40 days and nights in the wilderness, in the desert, and it turned into an experience of temptation. Are you sure you're ready for the spiritual journey? All manner of things show up to challenge our belief, our chosen path, the questions we seek. And there have been other sages that have been in this journey of living in the question as well. One of my favorites is this character. Here's a fellow who knew how to live in the peace and the presence of all that is. All this guy wanted was a happy, content life. Do you remember images of him in a lounge chair sipping his lemonade? And then along comes Elmer Fudd with his little shotgun, and he's determined to put this guy, Bugs Bunny, into a hot water bath. And Bugs is thinking, well, it's a spa day, thank you so much. And then he finally realizes he's about to be dinner. And he jumps out of the pan of hot water, and sacred shenanigans and holy mischief ensue between them as Bugs undoes Elmer's intention with seemingly little effort. Standing like this, just leaning on something, watching Elmer do his crazy stuff. And Bugs is just calm, centered, laughing at Elmer, laughing at the troubles of life, knowing that he'll come out in that lounge chair with his lemonade at the end of the story. We can find wisdom in just almost any place if we look for it. A Unity minister, Reverend Don Lansky, said, "At this time in human history," I believe this was written 30 or 40 years ago, but it is such a contemporary statement for me. "In this time in human history, we are called to a boldness of faith through prayer, meditation, the practices of gratitude and forgiveness, listening and following our inner guidance, and practicing the presence of God in every moment." So this is the roadmap for that journey that has no refundable ticket to it. To stay in the connection with Spirit. If you are serious about changing your life, the quickest way to engage that shift, the law of mind action, is to step into a serious practice of meditation. Now, there are any number of ways to do that. And if you've read some instructions and you haven't found your path for meditation, find another set of instructions. Or throw the instruction book out and just sit quietly and allow your mind to begin an expansive journey in which you can connect to the presence of God within. There's a reason prayer and meditation is another of our basic principles in Unity, because the Fillmores learned through their own experience the power of sitting in the stillness to be in communion with that presence. To be able to gain the insight that today's message spoke of. To be able to take advantage of the ability to heal our body, to stay in wholeness, because the pervasive energy that moves in our whole cellular system is the love and light of God. So I encourage you to find a practice of meditation that supports your journey in closing that gap between the tension of where you stand right now in the ick to where you are experiencing all that you meant to be in this journey when you came. To rest in that stillness, to find the quiet center point, to trust. To trust that wisdom that will arise within you and guide your life forward. To trust that even the gap moments, the experiences of tension and dissatisfaction are also divine and that have great gifts to move your life forward. That you can support that process with gratitude practices. Anybody have done or currently doing a gratitude practice, a journal, a list, a mental cataloging of your day before you go to sleep and all that took place that was a blessing? If you need a partner, start a texting gratitude chain. A friend and I, for a very long time, send 3 things we're grateful for to one another by text. Morning is the goal, and whenever it happens, it's a connection to say, I'm honoring your experience as well as mine. And we partner in this growth in stepping across that gap in our journey. We call ourselves back to awareness of the presence of all that is divine within us. And by the way, this partner of mine in gratitude, he's an atheist. But he has great appreciation for that which works, because that's a marker of the spiritual journey when we recognize that truth works and that what is working in our life represents that greater spiritual truth. So when something's working, recognize the power of truth that it holds for you. And forgiveness is a practice that clears away the debris that's in our way, because there is no space in you that is not filled with God.